what we're going to do is we're going to learn that we have solid black areas, which are the darkest of the dark, and we have light areas, which in this case is white paper, but in the near future, it will be your colored paper. And then something in between, we're going to call our gray area. It's not, well, I'm not talking about the color gray. I'm talking about where you have put a mix of black and light area to create a gray area. And again, we're not talking about the color gray. We're talking about where you are covering some of, oh, I don't have my camera. I'll show you in a second. Covering some of the paper to create a grayish look or a muted look, not too bright, not too dark. So we learned in pencil how to shade. I flipped it. That's why the numbers are backwards, just because I personally visually like light to dark increase rather than dark to light. And the only picture I could find was this one. So I flipped it. But I like it to show me that you are understanding the pressure of the pencil. And as it gets darker, you press harder and you cover more surface of the paper. This is how you would use it. So this is what we're doing. Hatching, cross-hatching, stipple. Those are the 3 new words we're going to learn, and we're going to practice them. And then we will use them in our hands. This is what it looks like on a larger scale, like magnified scale of hatching, cross-hatching. This is what our hatching will look like. I'm going to move so you can see what we're going to use it for in the future. Say you're doing seashells or any shape that needs not only texture but value, you can use hatching to incorporate on top of your design to make it look realistic. Oh, let's go back. So again, what we're reading, visually reading, is light to dark, right? So how we're going to use it on our hand, is like this, right? We have blank areas, which are our negative space. We have solid black areas, and then we have this gray area. See where I've put the stippling in that finger? Those are called our gray areas because it's not empty space. It's not solid black. It's been changed to a mix, and we're going to call that our gray areas. How we're going to use this is when you show me your designs before we turn them in, and I say, I need you to add a gray value of stipple level 3. You will be able to go to this guide and be like, oh, okay, she's talking about level 3. She wants me to add these dots here on that area, and that's the level she wants. Or you know what? That level 3 isn't dark enough. I need you to make it more of a level 5. And you add more dots and you darken it. So that's how it's going to help me convey to you how to help your drawings look better. You understand how we're going to use this later? So it's not just we're making this for fun and for wasting time. We're making it so we can have this vocabulary to use between each other and understand what I'm visually wanting from you, because I can use these guides to tell you what I want you to do on your final art piece. All right, let's get started. So we are on our grids. We're on our grid. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here. Before I do that, let me show you. So last year, if we were in person, I would have given you a strip of yellow paper, and we would have grid that and numbered them and done all that business, but we're not. So you have your sketchbook, and that's what you're using. So this is what it's going to look like. We have 6 boxes, and we're going to put lines, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to see what I'm looking for. What I want to see from you is I want to see a gradual light to dark. I want you to show me that you understand the more lines it has, the darker it will become. The more space it has, the lighter it becomes. And we're going from light to dark. Okay? Hatching lines can also be broken up lines. My Sharpie is dying too because I'm using mine double time. I have to do this 3 times. So hatching lines can also be broken up lines. So as we get to the darker ones, we'll do more of a broken line. So it'll start as a solid line, and then it will start to break up as we are needing it to be filled into the white spaces to make our lines look thicker and darker. Okay, so the first box we're going to do is we're going to separate it about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so we're going to put our lines in, diagonal lines, and we're going to open them up, starting from left, going to right, and we're going to just put in those diagonal stripes, leaving white space. That's our level 1. So when I ask you to add a level 1 shading of hatching to your drawing in a particular area, you'll be able to do so. So let's start getting closer. So diagonal lines, a little bit closer, more like a 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so nice diagonal straight lines. Control your line work. Put in them a little bit closer. Okay, box number 3 is where they really start to get closer and we start to see a difference in color where we're hiding more of the white paper with our line work. So this slows me down because I'm purposely looking for my lines to be straight and a certain width between them. So that way I get a little bit darker than the one previous. Okay, box number 4, I'm going to make it where my Sharpie line and the width between them is the exact same. So I'm going to put my Sharpie and then the same amount of space between that Sharpie. The white line is almost as thin as my Sharpie line, is what I'm going to do. And if they touch, they touch. No big deal, not the end of the world. If they're too far away, add some in between. You're gradually looking for darker. Okay. Box number 5, they start to touch. Okay, they start to get real close and touch, and I start to put little hairlines in between to make it darker. So in that white spot, white space between my line, I'm putting some broken hatch lines in between to darken it up, because this is number 5 and level 5 should be pretty close to dark black. So it can start to break up. It doesn't need to be a solid diagonal line. You can start to break it up to fill in to make it darker. Okay, keep going. Nice diagonal. I'm going to move over just a little bit so I have more room for my arm. There we go. Nice diagonal lines. Put in a solid diagonal and then fill the space with hatch lines that are broken. Careful not to bend them. They're not curved. Okay. Kind of like rain coming down sideways, right? Or hair a little bit. Okay. And then box 6, really close, lots of touching, very little white paper coming through. I'm not coloring inside solid. Okay, don't color it in solid. It needs to be made with lines so we get this overall texture at the end. If you color it in solid, it doesn't give the same effect as using the hatch lines. So use the hatch lines. All our hatch lines are nice and straight. If we were doing a circle and trying to make this look round, our hatch lines would match the outside roundness. They would be curved, but because these are squares, our hatch lines are straight and flat, just like the square. But if it was a different shape, like for instance, when you do your finger or the side of your arm of your drawing, these hatch lines will be curved because the object itself is a 3-dimensional curved shape or form, right? You don't want to flatten your 3-dimensional form. You want to enhance it to make it look 3D. So when you're done with all 6 boxes, then you look at it and you take inventory. Did I gradually go from light to dark? Take a look at our cross-hatching. Cross-hatching, the difficulty with cross-hatching is that it gets dark fast. So be very conservative with your line work and making sure that you don't get too dark too fast, because we can't remove it, right? Notice that if you're using cross-hatching on a contour, like towards the bottom of that worksheet, you'll see it's contoured. Again, you want to contour on your subject to make it look like it's three-dimensional. In this case, we're just doing flat work, so our cross-hatching is going to be just flat lines. But depending on what you're cross-hatching on, you may want to have curved lines. Okay, so this is cross-hatching in a still life, and you see a cone, and you see like a jug or almost like a teapot, not a teapot, like a pitcher. You see some cylinders, you see a funnel, see a container in the back. Here's cross-hatching and hatching been used together. Hatching where you just have straight lines, no crossing over them, and then cross-hatching where it gives us that pattern. Notice that cross-hatching gives us an automatic textural surface, with cross-hatching. So if you want texture and line design and shading, then you use cross-hatching. Oops. So take a read of this. Read this really well. We're going to do diagonal lines like we did before, and then we're going to cross back over them with the opposite direction of diagonal lines. Each time we do it, we close the gap more to go darker. But they're going to get dark fast because you're using two sets of lines crossing over each other. Okay. So here we go. We're going to go to our cross-hatching, which, let me show you what it looks like before we get started. You see the cross-hatching here. Again, we're going to go one way, then the other. It's going to give us this diamond woven look. We're going to continue to weave and get darker all the way to the end. Okay, again, being very conservative with our woven pattern because it's going to get dark fast. How it should look on your paper is like this. Okay, so we're going to do this, and we're going to gradually get darker. Notice that the last one is still line work with a little bit of white peeking through. It's not solid black. I did not color it in. Okay, so again, let's put in our first set of lines. We're just going to open them up because, again, we're going to add another set. So we want to just open them up like that. I currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines in my 1-inch square. So 4 to 5 lines would be fine. 2 lines would be too little. 7 to 10 lines would be too much for box number 1. And I'm going to use about the same spacing in my hatch. Okay, so cross hatch. So I've crossed them over and I've made diamond shapes in box number 1. About the same even spacing between my first diagonal set and my second diagonal set. Okay, so let's take a look at number 2 where we're headed. The diagonals get closer, so my diamonds become smaller. So let's do that. So a little bit closer, about an 16th. Actually, it's probably an 1/8 here. Yeah, we're at an 1/8. Okay, so an 1/8. All right, and then I'm going to do that kind of same spacing going the opposite direction. Nice and straight. No broken lines at this case. Okay. And you can see one of my lines curved up. That's okay. It still is going to read as cross-hatching. And again, level 2 cross-hatching. Level 3 cross-hatching, let's close that gap and go to the 1/16. Let's get a little bit closer here. Which requires a little bit steadier hand and concentration when they get closer, not to touch, right? So you put in your diagonal and then same spacing going the opposite direction. Trying not to touch them, curve them. Okay, so you have a basket weave. Again, my diagonals and my diamonds now are closer. Okay, so the next one is going to start to look like woven pattern. Okay, so look at number 4 right there. You'll see it starts to look like woven pattern and more textural, less space. So here we go. We have our diagonal and we're nice and close. And if they touch, that's okay. We don't want them all touching because we still want white paper showing through. We want light coming through. This is only level 4. It's not level 6, which in level 6 we might have less white paper. Oh, I got a little wonky there. If they're too gapped out, just put a hatch mark inside them. Close that light gap. If they touch, they touch. Just next one, open it up a little bit more. Okay, and then cross over with the same amount of space. Again, creating this textural woven crosshatch look. Looks like fabric, like a burlap. Real nice and organized. But again, giving us these options of gray that we can put into our artwork. Also take inventory. Are you getting darker in level 4 than 3? I hope so. Okay. Here we go. Level 5. Level 5 is going to be close to almost black, but not quite. And then level 6 will be almost black with a little peek throughs. And you'll need to put some hatch marks in here, some short hatch marks to shade it even darker than just the diagonal line. So you can see I'm starting. Using lines only. Okay. Woo. And then cross over. Control the movement, control the line. Nice and organized. Okay, and then my next one will be really dark. This one should look close to black, but not black. Like it still has some white coming through, because solid would be black with no white, right? Make sure those lines don't have tails because you're going too fast. Make sure that they're nice straight lines. They're not curling and they're not having any tails. Like when you pick up the ink from the paper, you're not scribbling. You're still making nice, even hatch marks, and you're controlling. Make those hatch marks over. Number 6 being almost black. Again, still leaving some of that white peek through. So stippling is also known as pointillism. Pointillism is an art form of using dots. A lot of artists that use pointillism or stippling technique, they use color. So instead of coloring something orange, they'll use red and yellow stippling dots together to create an orange. Okay, so if you're a pointillist or are using pointillism as your art form, you're using dots and you can combine colored dots to create a whole nother color, even though they're not blended or mixed together, they're next to each other. In our case, our stippling, we'll be using our Sharpie to either cluster the dots together to make it dark or open them up to make it light. And when you use it in your piece, in your artwork, you'll see, just like in these letters where the T goes from dark to light, the P goes from dark to light, the L, so that's how you're going to use stippling. You'll use the stippling dark to light or light to dark in one area, okay? You want to make sure, whoopsies, you want to make sure that your stippling doesn't have tails. If you do it too fast, your dots will have tails. It is very meticulous and tedious dot making, making sure they look like actual dots, not tails. But this is how you'll use them in your piece. Notice how it goes from open dots down here to a cluster of dots to completely solid dots where we don't see any white paper coming through. That's how you use your stipple technique or stippling in your artwork. So like when I was talking about Evelyn putting stippling in her lotus flowers, this is a very delicate shading technique. If she did hatching or cross hatching, it's too harsh for a little lotus flower. So a stippling technique will give her value, but a very light, delicate value on her design. I know that this is blurry. I thought it was not, but it is. But you still see the idea of going from spaced out dots to light, to medium light, to medium, to dark, or medium dark to dark. So here's using stippling on a flower. So like I was saying to Evelyn, how to use the stippling, light to dark, leaving some areas light, so that way you have that contrast of where you have shaded. Same thing here on this butterfly. It shows the stippling being used as the line work to separate the design and the body and the wings to show light to dark and the organization of its design. All done with dots. So this is really nice where it gives us the hint of a human or a figure coming through something. However, this artist has outlined the outside edges of the hand, which takes away from the stippling technique. So this would be a no-no. If we are using hatching, cross-hatching, or stippling, we are not outlining those symbols or those designs. We are using the technique of gathering those dots closer together to give us a darker edge, not using lines to outline. Do you see how it flattens the hands? Using the outline will flatten your shape. That goes against the whole reasoning of using the value technique of shading, where we're trying to add depth and make it look three-dimensional. If you can imagine taking the outline away from the hand, the outline that they've drawn around the hand, how much better these hands would look, right? They would look a lot better. Okay, so take a read. This is what we're doing. Light to dark using dots. Okay, so let's look at what the read looks like. Remember, we're reading the visual information. We're going to stipple. That's the technique. And when we do it, we call it stippling. We're going to light to dark. And remember, these are not dots with tails. If you go too fast, they're going to have tails. If you hold it there for a couple seconds, your dots will get larger and read darker. So you can see how they're skinny little dots in number 1, and in number 2, I held my pen a little bit longer for a couple of them to give them a darker, thicker look of a dot. And then in my other ones here, they're a little bit smaller but closer together, clustering. Okay? If you hold it too long, you're going to bleed through to the other page. So that's too long. If it's going through this paper to the next page, you're holding it too long. So it will go through a little bit, see? But it should not go through to the next page because this is nice thick paper. This is a multi-surface sketchbook, which means we can paint on it later. Second quarter, woohoo, painting. Okay, so we're gonna stipple now, okay? So again, it's a careful thought process. If your pen is drying out, use it on a piece of paper to draw with to get it alive again. Okay, and then dots. And then, again, a careful dot pattern. And understanding the pickup is straight up towards the ceiling so you don't get a tail. Okay, and it's a light pattern first, and then they're closer together as we go. Maybe hold it a couple of seconds so the dots become bigger, so they read darker even though they're spaced out. They can be small and large dots in one square. You can start to leave a little bit smaller dots, or you can hold your pen there for a second and it'll be a bigger dot. Again, if you hold it there for longer than 1 to 2 seconds, you'll start to bleed through. We don't want that. Okay, so box number 2, getting darker with bigger dots and small dots as a mix, but still allowing for that white paper to show through. Box number 3, increasing the amount of dots by closing the gap of the white paper. The dots are closer. They're not touching because it's only level 3. And be conservative. Let your paper be open. You could always add more dots, but I can't take dots away. Slowly adding, lifting my paper or lifting my pen straight up in the air so I don't get tails. Take a look at that. It doesn't look dark enough. So now I go in part of the negative, open gaps, negative space, open gaps, and I add more dots. Again, not touching. As long as I can control it, just putting more dots to create more darkness in level 3. Whoops, those ones touched. Let's see, still needs a little bit more, maybe a couple second hold on some of them so I get some bigger ones in here to give it more weight, visual weight. Looking for that transition from number 2 to 3, making sure that number 3 does look darker, not too dark, but does look darker. Okay, I think I'm good with that, right? 1, 2, 3, light, getting darker. Now number 4, let's take a read real quick and see what number 4 look like and make sure we get there. Okay, so number 4, some of them are touching. We want to make sure that we don't touch too many in a row where we start to get a line developed, okay? All right. And I'm going to hold a little bit more, a couple seconds, so I get some larger ones in here. Again, heavier weight, right? The larger the dot, because there's more black, it's going to start to look darker, even if I have the same amount of space. The dot being bigger is going to feel darker. This is very tedious, meticulous work. That's why we don't do a whole pointillism drawing that's, this whole page. That would be really a lot of work and many hours. So we're going to use our pointillism or our stipple technique in just delicate areas of our design to add value. Like Evelyn's lotus flower will look perfect. And just like I showed you before, in my finger behind this intricate design, I have some stippling to give it some more value behind that design. So again, stay light, then add more if needed. If you go too dark, you can't take them off. Number 5, let's take a look at number 5 real quick. Number 5, okay, so look, it's dark, but it's not black. It's dark, but it's not black, right? Okay, number 5, here we go. And again, the harder it becomes because now I've got to do lots of dots, and I don't want to get lazy. I don't want to make tails or lines. These are still dots. So stick with it. Tedious work, I know. So again, number 5, getting darker. I can stay lighter at first and then add more because I can't take them off. So I want to make sure I'm going. Here's what we completed today during class. If you're watching this video because you were absent or you needed more time to complete the assignment, make sure that you catch up to us and finish all 3 value scales using hatching, cross hatching and stippling.